everybody, welcome back. I'm Jade Fish, and whether you're here live or just floating in later, I'm really glad you found your way here. This is our quiet ocean corner, just reading soft thoughts and existing for a bit. Oh, it feels calm today. Before we dive in, I have a couple life updates. One, my cousin is actually coming from overseas this summer, and she's staying for 2 months. So my house is going to be significantly less quiet. But I think she plans to take some English classes, so I'll just stream when she's not home. Because, again, no one really knows I'm doing this. Also, number 2, I have an interview this week for a part-time job. And I'm kind of really nervous. I never had a job before, as I lived a pretty sheltered life, so this feels a little... well, you know, I'm sure everybody at least had an interview for a job before. Maybe you have a job right now, part-time or otherwise. I'm in the co-op program at my uni, and I got burnt out on all the rejections, so I'm not that optimistic of this, but I want to try my best, do my best, and give it my all, you know? As pessimistic as I am also a little excited. So, if you have any advice, please share it in the comments. And I really do hope I get this job because I want the experience. It's also my aunt's favorite store, so I know if I get a job, I'll see her more often because then she'll come in to use my employee discounts. It's retail, so it's most clothing brands, so I might actually get to revamp my wardrobe. I have things I wore in 8th grade that still fit me, which honestly, I don't know if I should be more impressed about the quality or if I should be looking at myself and like, you need to fix your fashion sense because it's kind of broken. Anyway. What's today's stream about? Today we'll be continuing Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Still using a physical copy, so again, no screen sharing. So just books and vibes. Last week we read chapters 1 to 5, so today we'll be starting with chapter 6. It's starting to get closer to the actual drama of it all. And I think it's gonna be fun. You know? Finally, for the reading plan. Again, like before, I don't have a strict goal for this. We're just gonna drift around the current, read for an hour, or until I get tired, or until my voice decides it's done for the day. So no pressure at all. You can stay the whole time or just float in and out like a wandering fish. Before we start, how do you like what we're Pride and Prejudice so far? Do you like it? Or do you not? Me personally, I really like it so far because this is my second reading through these first few chapters because again, I did start this book before, I never finished it, but I never realized how much depth Jane Austen managed to fit to these first 5 chapters and how much depth people today take away from the characters when adapting this book into movies and other media. Also, I think they're starting to get a little neat ugly that Elizabeth and what's his name? I only know him as Mr. Darcy. Whatever, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth had at the ball. I think that is so cute. That's such a neat ugly. Well, on Elizabeth's part at least. It's like, what are you're just telling me that she was just sitting there and then some guy just like behind her, just like within earshot too, not even pretending to be innocent, just insults her to her face? Like, she's stronger than me, I'll tell you that. Even on Mr. Darcy's side, he just doesn't want to be there. He's just dragged along because his puppy dog hyperactive friend just dragged him along. And he would rather not be there, so he'd rather not put in the effort, so like I get it, but also that's kind of rude at a party. Like, you would at least try just a little bit, and then as long as he's given the minimum effort, just enough so people don't talk, you just dip. Also, second question, do you guys prefer the PDF or the physical books? Because I like the physical books more because I can hold it, I can flip the pages through it, and I can just like, I don't know, it feels more immersive, I guess, when you're holding it in your hand. But also I feel like the PDF version is better for you guys because you get to actually see as I read through the pages, you can follow along with your eyes or cursor or whatever. Food for thought, I guess. And again, once I start reading, I'll mostly be focusing on actual writing itself. But I might pause to react or just process drama, I guess. Because I feel like this book is gonna get a little more messy now. But overall, this is still a calm stream, so feel free to relax, study, draw, or just exist with me. Just thank you for whatever time you give me. Alright, let's sink back into the story. This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, starting at chapter 6. Chapter 6. The ladies of Longbourn soon waited on those of Netherfield. The visit was returned in due form. Miss Bennet's pleasing manners grew on the goodwill of Mrs. Hertz and Miss Bingley. And though the mother was found to be intolerable and the younger sisters not worth speaking to, a wish of being better acquainted with them was expressed towards the two eldest. By Jane, this attention was received with greatest pleasure. But Elizabeth still saw superciliousness in the treatment of everybody, hardly excepting even her sister, and could not like them. Though their kindness to Jane, such as it was, had a value, as arising in all probability from influence of their brother's admiration. It was generally evident whenever they met that he did admire her, and to her it was equally evident that Jane was yielding to the preference which she had begun to entertain for him from the first, and was a way to be very much in love. But she considered with pleasure that it was not likely to be discovered by the world in general, since Jane united with great strength of feeling a composure of temper and a uniform cheerfulness of manner, which would guard her from the suspicions of the impertinent. She mentioned this to her friend Miss Luca. Miss Lucas. "It may perhaps be pleasant," replied Charlotte, "to be able to impose on the public in such a case. But it is sometimes a disadvantage to be so very guarded. If a woman conceals her affection with the same skill from the object of it, she may lose the opportunity of fixing him. And it will then be but poor consolation to believe the world equally in the dark. There is so much of gratitude or vanity in almost every attachment, that it is not safe to leave any of it to itself. We can all begin freely. A slight preference is natural enough, but there are very few of us who have heart enough to be really in love without encouragement. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better shew more affection than she feels. Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on. But she does help him on, so much as her nature will allow. If I can perceive her regard for him, he must be a simpleton indeed not to discover it too. Remember, Eliza, that he does not know Jane's disposition as you do. But if a woman is partial to a man and does not endeavor to conceal it, he must find it out. Perhaps he must, if he sees enough of her. Though Bingley and Jane meet tolerably often, it is never for many hours together, and they always see each other in large mixed parties. It is impossible that every moment should be employed in conversing together. Jane should therefore make the most of every half hour in which she commands his attention. When she is secure of him, there would be leisure for falling in love as much as she chooses. Your plan is a good one, replied Elizabeth, where nothing is in question but the desire of being well married. And if I were determined to get a rich husband, or any husband, I dare say I should adopt it. But these are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design. As yet she cannot even be certain of the degree of her own regard, nor of its reasonableness. She has known him for only a fortnight. She danced 4 dances with him at Marytown. She saw him one morning at his own house, and has since dined in company with him 4 times. This is not quite enough to make her understand his character. Not as you represent it. Had she merely dined with him, she might only have discovered whether he had a good appetite. But you must remember that 4 evenings have been also spent together, and 4 evenings may do a great deal. Yes, those 4 evenings have enabled them to ascertain that they both like vintage yarn better than commerce, but with respect to any other leading characteristic, I do not imagine that much has been unfolded. Well, said Charlotte, I wish Jane success with all my heart, and if she were to marry him tomorrow, I should think she had as good a chance of happiness as if she were to be studying his character for a 12-month. Happiness in marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the dispositions of the parties are ever so well known to each other, and ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their felicity in the least. They always contrive to grow sufficiently unlike afterwards to have their share of vexations. And it is better to know as little as possible of their effects of the person with whom you are to press your life. You make me laugh, Charlotte, but it is not a sound. You know it is not sound, and that you would never act in this way yourself. Occupied in observing Mr. Bingley's attentions to her sister, Charlotte was far from suspecting that she herself becoming an object of interest in the eyes of his friend, Mr. Darcy had. Mr. Darcy had at first scarcely allowed her to be pretty. he had looked at her without admiration at the ball, and when they next met, he looked at her only to criticize. But no sooner had he made it clear to himself and his friends that she is hardly a good feature into her face, than he began to find it was rendered uncommonly intelligent by the beautiful expression of her dark eyes. To this discovery succeeded some others equally mortifying. Though he had detected with a critical eye more than one failure of perfect symmetry in her form, he was forced to acknowledge her figure to be light and pleasing, and in spite of his asserting that her manners were not those of the fashionable world, he was caught by their easy playfulness. Of this she was perfectly unaware. To her he was only the man who made himself agreeable nowhere, and who had not thought her handsome enough to dance with. He began to wish to know more of her, and as a step towards conversing with her himself, attended to her conversations with others. His doing so drew her notice. It was at Sir William Lucas's, where a large party were assembled. "What does Mr. Darcy mean?" said she to Charlotte, "by listening to my conversation with Colonel Foster?" That is a question which Mr. Darcy can only answer. But if he does it any more, I shall certainly let him know that I see what he is about. He has a very statical eye, and if I do not begin by being impertinent myself, I shall soon grow afraid of him. On his approaching them soon afterwards, though without seeming to have any intention of speaking, Miss Luce defied her friend to mention such a subject to him, which immediately provoking Elizabeth to do it. She turned to him and said, "Did not you think, Mr. Darcy, that I expressed myself uncommonly well just now, when I was teasing Colonel Foster to give us a ball at Marytown? With great energy. With great energy. It is a subject which always makes a lady energetic. You are severe on us." "It'll be her turn soon to be teased," said Miss Lucas. "I am going to open the instrument, Eliza, and you know what follows. You are a very strange creature by way of a friend, always wanting me to play and sing before anybody and everybody. If my vanity has taken a musical turn, you would have been invaluable. But as it is, I would really rather not sit down before those who must be in the habit of hearing the very best performers." "Oh," Miss Lucas persevering, however, she added, "Very well, if it must be so, it must be." And gravely glancing at Mr. Darcy, "There is a fine old saying which everybody here is of course familiar with. Keep your breath to cool your porridge, and I shall keep mine to swell my song." Her performance was pleasing, though no means capital. After a song or two, and before she could reply to the necessities of several that she would sing again, she eagerly succeeded at the instrument by her sister Mary, who, having, in consequence of being the only plain one in the family, worked hard for knowledge and accomplishment, was always impatient for display. Mary had neither genius nor taste, and though vanity had given her application, it had given her likewise a pedant air and conceited manner, which would have injured a higher degree of excellence than she had reached. Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had been listening to it with much more pleasure, though not playing half so well, and Mary, at the end of a long concerto, was glad to purchase praise and gratitude by Scottish and Irish airs, at the request of her younger sisters, who, with some of the Lucases and 2 or 3 officers, joined eagerly in dancing at one end of the room. Mr. Darcy stood near them in silent indignation at such a mode of passing the evening, to the exclusion of all conversation, and was too much engrossed by his own thoughts to perceive that Sir William Lucas was his neighbour. Till Sir William thus began, "What a charming amusement for young people this is, Mr. Darcy. There is nothing like dancing after all. I consider it as one of the first refinements of a polished society." "Certainly, sir, and it has the advantage also of being in vogue amongst the less polished societies of the world. Every savage can dance." Sir William only smiled. "Your friend performs delightfully," he continued after a pause, on seeing Bingley join the group, "and I doubt not that you are an adept in the science yourself, Mr. Darcy. You saw me dance at Marytown, I believe, sir." "Yes, indeed, and received no inconsiderable pleasure from the sight. Do you often dance at Sir James?" "Never, sir." "Do you not think it would be proper compliment to the place? It is a it's a compliment which I never pay to any place, if I can avoid it." "You have a house in town, I conclude?" Mr. Darcy bowed. "I had once some thought of fixing in town myself, for I am fond of superior society. But I did not feel quite certain that the air of London would agree with Lady Lucas." He paused in hopes of an answer, but his companion was not disposed to make any, and Elizabeth at that instant moving towards them, he was struck with the notion of doing a very gallant thing, and called out to her, "My dear Miss Elizabeth, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner. You cannot refuse to dance, I am sure, when so much beauty is before you." After taking her hand, he would give it to Mr. Darcy, who, though extremely surprised, was not unwilling to receive it, when she instantly drew back and said with some discomposure to Sir William, "Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreated you not to suppose that I moved this way in order to beg for a partner." Mr. Darcy, with grave propriety, requested to be allowed the honor of her hand, but in vain. Elizabeth was determined, nor did Sir William at all shake her purpose by his attempt to persuasion. "You excel so much in the dance, Miss Elizabeth, that it is cruel to deny me the happiness of seeing you. Though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he has no objection, I am sure, to oblige us for 1/2 hour." "Mr. Darcy is all politeness," said Elizabeth, smiling. "He is indeed, but considering the inducement, my dear Miss Eliza, we cannot wonder at his complaisance, for who would object to such a partner?" Elizabeth looked archly and turned away. Her resistance had not injured her with the gentleman, and he was thinking of her with some complacency, when thus accosted by Miss Bingley. "I can guess the subject of your reverie." "I should imagine not. You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in this manner, in such society, and indeed I am quite of your opinion. I was never more annoyed. The insipidity, and yet the noise. There is nothing yet the self-importance of all those people. What would I give to hear your strictures on them? Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you. My mind was more agreeably engaged. I have been meditating on a great pleasure which a pair of fierce eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow." Miss Bingley immediately fixed her eyes on his face, and desired he would tell her what lady had the credit of inspiring such reflections. Mr. Darcy replied with great intrepidity, "Miss Elizabeth Bennet." "Miss Elizabeth Bennet?" repeated Miss Bingley. "I am all astonishment. How long has has she been such a favor? And pray when am I to wish you joy? That is exactly the question which I expected to ask. A lady's imagination is very rapid, to jump from admiration to love, and from love to matrimony in a moment. I knew you would be wishing me joy. Nay, if you are so serious about it, I shall consider the matter as absolutely settled. You will have a charming mother-in-law, indeed, and of course she will always be at Turnberry with you. He listened to her with perfect indifference, while she chose to entertain herself in this manner, and as his composure convinced her that all was safe, her wit flowed long. And I'm going to drink some water. So what do you all think? Personally, I think that this is around where most people see Miss Bingley as trying to push Mr. Darcy away from Elizabeth. I don't really see that yet. I can see echoes, but nothing concrete yet. I also think that Mr. William was pushing Elizabeth a little too much. Because, yes, this is the person you want to just push into dance a little bit, or don't just randomly pull a random lady off this, well, not off the street, but like, you know, just so you can make him dance. You have to make sure you have the lady's permission. Just like, hey, do you mind dancing just with this guy a little bit? But like in a more posh and like polite society acceptable manner. Chapter 7 is going to be a little shorter than Chapter 6 was. Chapter 6 was a monster. I need to drink some more water for that. Okay. Chapter 7. Mr. Bennet's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of 2,000 a year, which, unfortunately for his daughters, was entitled in default of male heirs on a distant relation, and their mother's fortune, though ample from her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficits of his. Her father had been an attorney in Marytown, and had left her £4,000. She had a sister married to a Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk to their father, and succeeded him in the business, and a brother settled in London, in a respectable line of trade. The village of Loughborough was only 1 mile from Marytown, a most convenient distance for the young ladies, who were usually tempered to there 3 or 4 times a week, to pay their duties to their aunt and to milliner's shop just over the way. The two youngest of the families, Catherine and Lydia, were particularly frequent in their attentions. Their minds were more vacant than their sisters, and when nothing better offered, a walk to Marytown was necessary to amuse their morning hours and furnish conversations for the evening. And however bare the news the country in general might be, they always contrived to learn some from their aunt. At present, indeed, they were well supplied both with news and happiness by the recent arrival of a militia regiment in the neighborhood. It was to remain the whole winter, and Marytown was the headquarters. The visit to Miss Phillips were now productive of the most interesting intelligence. Every day added something to their knowledge of the officers' names and connections. Their lodgings were not long a secret, and at length they began to know the officers themselves. Mr. Phillips visited them all, and this opened to his nieces a source of felicity unknown before. They could talk of nothing but officers, and Mr. Bingley's large fortune, the mention of which gave animation to their mother, was worthless in their eyes when opposed to the regiment of Inchside. After listening one morning to their effusions on the subject, Mr. Bennet coldly observed, "From all that I can collect by your manner of talking, you must be two of the silliest girls in the country. I have suspected it sometimes, but now I am convinced." Catherine was disconcerted and made no answer, but Lydia, with perfect indifference, continued to express her admiration of Captain Carter, and her hope of seeing him in the course of the day, as he was going to the next morning in London. "I am astonished, my dear," said Miss Bennet, "that you should be so ready to think of your own children silly. If I wish to think slightingly of anybody's children, it should not be my own, however. If my children are silly, I must hope to be always sensible of it. Yes, but as it happens, they are all of them are very clever. This is the only point, I flatter myself, on which we do not agree. I hope that our sentiments coincided in every particular, but I must so far differ from you as to think our two younger daughters uncommonly foolish." "My dear Mr. Bennet, you must not expect such girls to have the sense of their father and mother. When they get to our age, I dare say they will not think of officers any more than we do. I remember the time when I liked a red coat myself very well, and indeed, so do still at my heart. And if a smart young colonel with 5,000 or 6,000 a year should want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him. And I thought Colonel Foster looking very becoming the other night at Sir William's in his regimentals." Mamma. My aunt said that Colonel Foster and Captain Carter do not go so often to Miss Watson's as they did when they first came. She sees them now very often standing at Clark's library. Miss Bennet was prevented replying by the entrance of the footman with a note for Miss Bennet. "Come from Netherfield." It came from Netherfield, and the servant waited for an answer. Miss Bennet's eyes sparkled with pleasure, and she was eagerly calling out, while her daughter read, "Well, Jane, who is it from? What is it about? What did he say? Well, Jane, make haste and tell us. Make haste, my love." "It is from Miss Bingley," said Jane, and read it aloud. "My dear friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine today with Louisa and me, we shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives. For a whole day, tete-a-tete, between two women can never end without a quarrel. Come as soon as you can on the receipt of this. My brother and the gentleman are to dine with the officers. Yours ever, Sharp. Caroline Bingley. With the officers, cried Lydia. I wonder my aunt did not tell us of that. Dining out, said Miss Bennet, is very unlucky. Can I have the carriage? Said Jane. No, my dear, you had better go on horseback, because it seems likely to rain, and then you must stay all night. That would be a good scheme, said Elizabeth, if you were sure that they would not offer to send her home. Oh, but the gentleman will have Mr. Bingley's chaise to go to Marytown, and the Hurts have no horses to theirs. I had much rather go in the coach. But, my dear, your father soon cannot spare the horses. I am sure. They are wanted in the farm. Mr. Bennet, are they not? They are wanted in the farm more oftener than I can get them. But if you go to them today, said Elizabeth, my mother's purpose will be answered. She did at last extort from her father an acknowledgment that the horses were engaged, and Jane was therefore obligated to go on horseback. And her mother attended her to the door with many cheerful progenies of a bad day. Her hopes were answered. Jane had not been gone long before it rained hard. Her sisters were uneasy for her, but her mother was delighted. The rain continued the whole evening without intermission. Jane certainly could not come back. This was a lucky idea of mine indeed, said Miss Bennet, more than once, as if the credit of making it rain were all her own. Till the next morning, however, she was not aware of all the felicity of her contrivance. Breakfast was scarcely over when a servant from Netherfield brought up the following note for Elizabeth. My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suppose is to be imputed to my getting wet through yesterday. My kind friends will not hear of my returning home till I'm better. They insist also on seeing Mr. Jones. Therefore, do not be alarmed if I should hear of his making them to me, and accepting a sore throat and headache. There is nothing much the matter with me. Yours, N.C. Well, my dear, said Mr. Bennet when Elizabeth read the note aloud, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness, if she should die, it would be a comfort to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley and under your orders. Oh, I am not afraid of her dying. People do not die of little trifling colds. She will be taken good care of as long as she stays there. It is very well. I would go and see her if I could have the carriage. Elizabeth, feeling rather anxious, was determined to go her, though the carriage was not to be had, as she had no horse. She was no horsewoman. Walking was her only alternative. She declared her resolution. How can you be so silly? Cried her mother, as to think of such a thing, in all this dirt. You will not be fit to be seen when you get there. I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want. Is this a hint to me, Lizzie? Said her father, to send for the horses. No, indeed, I do not wish to avoid the walk. The distance is nothing. When one has a motive, only 3 miles. I shall be back by dinner. I admire the activity of your benevolence, observed Mary, but every impulse of feeling should be guided by reason, and in my opinion, exertion should always be in proportion to what is required. We will go as far as Marytown with you, said Charlotte and Lydia. Elizabeth accepted the company, and 3 young ladies set off together. If we make haste, said Lydia as they walked along, perhaps we may see something of Captain Carter before he goes. At Marytown they parted. The 2 youngest prepared to the lodgings of one of the officer's wives, and Elizabeth continued her walk alone, crossing field after field at a quick pace, jumping over stilts and springs over puddles with imprudent activity, and finding herself at last within the view of the house, with weary ankles, dirty stockings, and a face glowing with the warmth of exercise. She was strewn into the breakfast parlor, where all but Jane were assembled, and where her appearance created a great deal of surprise. That she should have walked 3 miles so early in the morning, in the day, in such dirty weather, and by herself, was almost incredible to Miss Hertz and Miss Bingley, and Elizabeth was convinced that they held her in contempt for it. She was received, however, very politely by them, and in their brother's manner there was something better than politeness. There was good humor and kindness. Mr. Darcy said very little, and Mr. Hertz nothing at all. The former was divided between admiration of the brilliance of exercise had given to her complexion, and doubt as to occasion justifying her coming so far alone. The latter was thinking only of his breakfast. Her inquiries after her sister were not very favorably answered. Miss Bennet had slept ill and thought up, was very feverish, and not well enough to leave her room. Elizabeth was glad to be taken to her immediately, and Jane, who had only been withheld by the fear of giving an alarm or inconvenience from expressing in her note how much she longed for such a visit, was delighted at her entrance. She was not equal, however, to much conversation, and when Miss Bingley left them together, could attempt little besides express the gratitude of the extraordinary kindness she was treated with. Elizabeth silently attended her. When breakfast was over, they were joined by the sisters, and Elizabeth began to like them herself, when she saw how much affection and solicitude they showed for Jane. The apothecary came, and having examined his patient, said as might be supposed that she had caught a violent cold, and that they must endeavor to get the better of it. Advised her to return to bed, and promised her some draughts. The advice was followed readily, for the feverish symptoms increased and her head ached acutely. Elizabeth did not quit her bedroom for a moment, nor were the other ladies often absent, the gentlemen being out, and they had in fact nothing to do elsewhere. When the clock struck 3, Elizabeth felt that she must go, and very unwillingly said so. Miss Bingley offered her the carriage, and she only wanted a little pressing to accept it, when Jane testified such concern in parting with her that Miss Bingley was obligated to convert the offer to the Chase into an odd invitation to remain at Netherfield for the present. Elizabeth most thankfully consented, and a servant was dispatched to Longbourn to acquaint the family with her stay, and to bring back a supply of clothes. That's the end of chapter 7, and I'm in desperate need of water. So far, I don't really like Mrs. Bennet's pushing of Jane to do this. This is back in the 1800s, I think. It's set in the 1800s, right? Like, colds and stuff can be really dangerous. They don't have our medicine, they don't have things like that. It can be... And then her mom just pushes her. When she gets cold, she's not even worried. That's as much as I like to say that Miss Bennet is usually unjustly not villainized, but like turned into a simple caricature of bad mom. This is not one of her good moments. This is definitely one of her worst moments. And I hope that she makes it up to Jane instead of just like being happy and being all, oh, what did he say? Oh, I can't. Oh, you must love being there with him. Like, oh man, this is your child. I went overseas once to visit relatives, and I got really, really sick, and my mom was really worried. She was on the phone the entire time I was conscious, just to make sure I was okay. So seeing this and comparing Miss Bennet to my mom, I'm just not seeing Miss Bennet as a really good mom right now for this situation. But of course, this is only chapter 7, so she could get better later on, or not, who knows. I think I'm just gonna finish chapter 8 and then we'll call it for the day. Because, again, it's another long-ish chapter, and I'm slowly losing my voice. Drink a little more water before I finish. Chapter 8. At 5 o'clock, the two ladies retired to dress, and at 6:30, Elizabeth was summoned to dinner. To the civil inquiries which then poured in, and amounts which she had the pleasure of distinguishing the much superior solitude of Mr. Bingley's, she could not make a very favorable answer. Jane was by no means better. The sisters, on hearing this, repeated 3 or 4 times how much they were grieved, how shocking it was to have a bad cold, and how excessively they disliked being ill themselves, and then thought no more of the matter. And their indifference towards Jane, when not immediately before them, restored Elizabeth to their enjoyment of her original dislike. Their brother, indeed, was the only one of the party whom she could regard with any complacency. But his anxiety for Jane was evident, and his attention to herself most pleasing, and they prevented her feeling herself so much an intruder as she believed she was considered by the others. He had very little notice from any but him. Miss Bingley was engrossed by Mr. Darcy, his sister scarcely less so. As for Mr. Hurst, for whom Elizabeth sat, it was an indolent man, who lived only to eat, drink, and play at cards, who, when he found her prefer a plain dish of ragout, had nothing to say to her. When dinner was over, she returned directly to Jane, and Miss Bingley began abusing her as soon as she was out of the room. Her manners were pronounced to be very bad indeed, a mixture of pride and impertinence. She had no conversation, no style, no taste, and no beauty. Miss Hurst thought the same and added, she has nothing, in short, to recommend her, but being an excellent walker. I shall never forget her appearance this morning. She looked almost wild. She did indeed, Louisa. I could hardly keep my countenance. Very nonsensical to come at all. Why must she be scampering about the country because her sister had a cold? Her hair so untidy, so low-see. Yes, and her petticoat. I hope you saw her petticoat, 6 inches deep in mud. I am almost certain, and the gown which had been let down to hide it, not doing its office. Your picture may be very exactly so, slippingly, but this is all lost upon me. I thought Miss Bennet looked remarkably well when she came in to the room this morning. Her dirty petticoat quite escaped my notice. You observed it, Mr. Darcy, I am sure, said Miss Bingley, and I am inclined to think you would not wish to see your sister make such an exhibition. Certainly not. To walk 3 miles, or 4, or 5, or whatever it is, above her ankles in dirt, alone, quite alone. What could she mean by it? It seems to me to shew an abominable sort of conceited independence, a most country town indifference to decorum. It shew an affection for a sister that is very pleasing. Pleasing, said Miss Bingley. I am afraid, Mr. Darcy, observed Miss Bingley in half-whisper, that this adventure has rather affected your admiration for her fine eyes. Not at all, he replied. They are brightened by the exercise. A short pause followed by this speech, and Miss Hope began again. I have an excellent regard for Jane Bennet. She is really a very sweet girl, and I wish with all my heart she were well settled. But with such a father and mother, and such low connections, I'm afraid there is no chance of it. I think I have heard you say that their uncle is an attorney in Marytown? Yes, and they have another who lives somewhere near Chapelside. That is capital, said her sister, and they both laughed heartily. If they had enough uncles enough to fill all Cheapside, said Bingley, it would not make them one jot less agreeable. But it must very materially lessen their chances of marrying men of any consideration in the world, replied Darcy. To this speech Bingley made no answer, but his sister gave it their hearty assent, and indulged their mirth for some time at the expense of their dear friend's vulgar relations. With a renewed tenderness, however, they repaired their room on leaving the dining parlor, and sat with her till summoned to coffee. She was still very poorly, and Elizabeth would not quit her at all till late in the evening, when she had the comfort of seeing her asleep. And when it reached to her rather right than pleasant that she should go downstairs herself, on entering the drawing room she found the whole party at loo, which was immediately invited to join them. But suspecting them to be playing high, she declined, and making her sister the excuse, said she would amuse herself for a short time she could stay below with a book. Mr. Hertz looked at her with astonishment. Do you prefer reading to cards? He said. That is rather singular. Miss Elizabeth Bennet, said Miss Bingley, despises the cards. She is a great reader and has no pleasure in anything else. I deserve neither such praise nor such censure, cried Elizabeth. I am not a great reader. I have pleasure in many things. In nursing your sister, I am sure you had pleasure, said Bingley, and I hope it is soon increased by seeing her quite well. Elizabeth thanked her from her heart, and then walked towards the table where a few books were laying. He immediately offered to fetch her others, all his library afforded. And I wish my collection were larger for your benefit and my own credit. But I am an idle fellow, and though I have not many, I have more than I ever looked into. Elizabeth assured him that she could suit herself perfectly with those in the room. I'm astonished, said Miss Bingley, that my father should have left so small a collection of books. What a delightful library you have in Pemberley, Mr. Darcy. It ought to be good, he replied. It has been the work of many generations. Then you have added so much to it yourself. You are always buying books. I cannot comprehend the neglect of a family library in such days as these. Neglect? I am sure you neglect nothing then can add to the beauties of the noble place. Charles, when you build your house, I wish it may be half as delightful as Pemberley. I wish it may. But I would really advise you to make your purchase in that neighborhood and take Pemberley for a kind of model. There is not a finer country in England than Derby's Shrine. With all my heart, I will buy Pemberley itself if Darcy will sell it. I am talking of possibilities, Charles. Upon my word, Caroline, I should think it more possible to get Pemberley by purchase than by intimidation. Elizabeth was so caught up by what passed as to leave her very little attention for her book, and soon laying it wholly aside, she drew near the card table and stationed herself between Mr. Bingley and his eldest sister, who observed the game. Is Miss Darcy much grown since the spring? Said Miss Bingley. Will she be as tall as I am? I think she will be. She is now about Miss Elizabeth Bennet's height, or rather taller. Oh, how I long to see her again! I never met anybody who delighted me so much. Such a countenance, such manner, and so extremely accomplished for her age. Her performance on the pianoforte is exquisite. It is amazing to me, said Miss Bennet, how young ladies can have patience to be so very accomplished as they all are. All young ladies accomplished? My dear Charles, what do you mean? Yes, all of them, I think. They all paint tables, covers, screens, and knit purses. I scarcely know any one who cannot do all of this, and I am sure I have never met a young lady so spoken for the first time without being informed that she is very accomplished. Your list of common extents of accomplishment, said Darcy, has too much truth. The word is applied to many a woman who deserves it no otherwise than by knitting a purse or covering a screen. But I am very far from agreeing with you in your estimate of ladies in general. I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen in the whole range of my acquaintance and that are rather accomplished. Nor I am sure, said Miss Bingley. Then, observed Elizabeth, you must comprehend a great deal of your idea of an accomplished woman. Yes, I do comprehend a great deal in it. Oh, certainly, cried his faithful assistant. No one can be really esteemed accomplished who does not greatly surpass what is usually met with. A woman must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, dancing, drawing, and the modern languages to deserve the word. And besides all this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions, or the word will be but half deserved. All this she must possess, added Darcy, and to all this she must yet add something more substantial in the improvement of her mind by extensive reading. I am no longer surprised by your knowing only 6 accomplished women. I rather wonder now at you knowing any. Are you so severe upon your own sex as to doubt the possibility of all this? I never saw such a woman. I never saw such capacity of taste and application and elegance as you describe united. Miss Hurst and Miss Bingley both cried out against the injustice of her implied doubt, and were both protesting that they knew many women who answered this description. But Mr. Hurst called them to order with bitter complaints of the inattention to what was going forward. As all conversation was thereby at an end, Elizabeth soon afterwards left the room. Elizabeth Bennet, said Miss Bingley, when the door was closed on her, is one of those young women who seek to recommend themselves to the other sex by undervaluing their own. And with many men, I dare say it succeeds. And in my opinion, it is partly devised and a very mean art. Undoubtedly, replied Darcy, to whom remarkably was chiefly addressed. There was meanness in all the arts in which ladies sometimes tendency to employ for captivation. Employ for captivation. Whatever bears affinity to cunning is despicable. Miss Bingley was not entirely satisfied with this reply as to continue the subject. Elizabeth joined them again, only to say that her sister was worse, and that she could not leave her. Bingley urged Mr. Jones being sent for immediately, while his sisters, convinced that no contrary advice could be of any servants, recommended an express to town for one of the most eminent physicians. This she would not heard of, but she was not so unwilling to comply with their brother's proposal, and it was settled that Mr. Jones should be sent for early in the morning if Miss Bennet were not decidedly better. Bingley was quite uncomfortable. His sister declared that they were miserable. They solaced their wretchedness, however, by duets after supper, while he could find no better relief to his feelings than by giving his housekeeper directions that every possible attention must be paid to the sick lady and her sister. And that was that. I'm gonna drink some water. I think Miss Bingley and Miss Hertz were too mean on Elizabeth. Instead of complaining about how she looked, they should have talked about how much love she had for her sister for coming all this way because of her sister. Instead, they were calling her names and insulting her. And I really don't like that. Poor Elizabeth. She didn't deserve this. She tried to stop Jane from going out like this, tried to stop her from getting sick like this. She went all the way there for Jane. But also, I think Elizabeth is blinded by everything else. By her love for Jane. Because while the Bingley sisters were mean, Elizabeth's predisposed dislike of them seemed to come through, because they seem to be able to tell almost that Elizabeth doesn't like them and looks down on them. And by Elizabeth saying she doesn't find any of them accomplished, that's just like a plain insult. You can't outright insult someone like that. Yes, there's backhanded compliments, they've been talking down to her for a while, but unless they break down that wall first and show you how ugly they are, if you break it down first, then you lose. You're showing them that their words get to you. And for those who don't know what's happening, like the men in the stories who just don't understand the complexities of women backhanded compliments and how women tear each other down because of this, how they're raised and taught in this era, she comes off as rude and ill-mannered. I also really hate how they were talking about how Bingley's sisters were talking about Jane's family. Like like they're calling it vulgar connections, but that's their family. You don't choose family. You can't say she won't marry well because of her family. Such a shame that such a sweet girl came from such a bad family. They're not bad people. They're just not people that you like. And that's not nice to say. Honestly. Forget the evil mother-in-law. Girl, this is the evil sister-in-law. Well, I'm getting like very tired. And I think this. Well, I think I'm getting a little tired. My voice is almost gone. I read 6, 7, 8, 3 chapters today. 3 long chapters today. They were much longer than the first 5. I enjoyed it. What about you? Personally, I think this is getting interesting. I hope Jane will get better soon. I can't wait till more characters are shown and talked about. I can't wait for an actual one-on-one conversation between Darcy and Elizabeth without other people around. I know that'll take a while because of like societal niceties and how you get an escort for things, but I think that's gonna happen soon, I hope. I really like Lydia and Catherine's friendship. Siblings, I think they mirror Jane and Elizabeth's friendship, just like on a younger, more silly scale. But yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your day with me under the waves. And I hope you'll have a wonderful day, a lovely night, and if you're dreaming, peaceful dreams. Good night!